Imagine this for a second. You're halfway through your degree, everything's going great, and then, bam, you get an email. Your school is closing, for good. What in the world happens to your credits, all that tuition money, your entire future? It sounds like an absolute nightmare, right? But it happens. And when it does, it's not supposed to be total chaos. See, there's actually a playbook for this, a whole process designed to protect the students who are caught right in the middle. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at why schools even get to the brink of closure in the first place. Then, we'll dive into the super high stakes if they handle it badly. After that, we'll get into the official rulebook, what their real responsibility is to students. And finally, we'll ask the big question. How can a failing school even afford to do this the right way?
All right, so first things first, what could possibly push an institution, a place of learning, to the very edge of shutting its doors for good? Let's take a look.
Yeah, that's the question that probably sends a shiver down the spine of any student or faculty member. It creates so much anxiety, and for good reason. But it's really important to know that there is a structured process for this. It's not supposed to be a free-for-all. There are steps to navigate this exact challenge.
So why does this even happen? Well, the reasons can be pretty complicated and tangled together, but they usually fall into one of these three buckets. Maybe the school is just bleeding money and can't stay profitable. Often that's tied directly to the next one, losing student enrollments, which, is their main source of income. Or they could be in hot water with regulators, facing massive compliance issues that threaten their very ability to operate. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. A school deciding to close, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is what happens if they mess up the actual process of shutting down. The consequences are huge, and they ripple out everywhere.
We're not just talking about locking the doors and turning off the lights. A badly managed closure sets off this huge domino effect. It can create legal nightmares, financial ruin, and a public relations disaster for the school's leadership.
For starters, you've got the money. The school is suddenly on the hook for massive student refunds, which can completely wipe out any cash they have left. This can also trigger claims against their financial guarantees, which are basically the insurance policies they have to carry to prove they can cover their debts.
And then comes the public fallout. You can just imagine the headlines, right? Stories about students left stranded, their dreams put on hold. In today's world, that kind of negative press spreads like wildfire, and the damage to a school's reputation can be instant and permanent.
Oh, and you better believe the regulators are watching every single move. If a school doesn't follow the legally required steps for closing down, they will get hit with serious fines and penalties. It just adds another massive financial weight to an organization that's already sinking.
But look, with all this talk about money, bad press, and penalties, the source material is crystal clear on one thing. The single most important factor, the absolute top priority through all of this chaos, has to be the students, period.
So that brings us to the process itself. If protecting students is priority number one, what does that actually look like in practice? What are the rules of the road for a shutdown?
And this is a point you've just got to get. A school can't just decide to close up shop overnight. It's not like closing a restaurant or a retail store. Because of the special promise they make to students, closing a school is a highly regulated process with very specific legal hoops they have to jump through.
A proper shutdown really follows this clear three-step game plan. First, you have to do a strategic analysis to figure out what went wrong. Next, and this is crucial, the school has to talk to its regulators to understand exactly what their legal obligations are. And finally, they have to create and then actually carry out a formal closure plan that's all about protecting those students.
Now, you'd think there'd be one simple checklist for this, right? Nope. This is where it gets super complicated. The rules can be totally different depending on the state. Every single accrediting agency might have its own unique set of demands. Even something basic like what to do with student records can change from one regulator to the next.
Which brings us right back to the heart of the matter, the whole reason for all these rules and regulations, honoring the promise that was made to every single student who walked through those doors.
At the end of the day, this is the bottom line, both legally and ethically. When a student enrolls, that's a contract. And just because the school is closing, that contract doesn't just disappear into thin air. The school has a fundamental duty to help students find a path forward so they can finish what they started.
And the difference between doing it right and doing it wrong, well, it is night and day for the students. A responsible closure means students get what are called teach-out options, basically a plan to finish their degree at another school. Their goals are respected.
An irresponsible closure, it just leaves them stranded, their education totally derailed. And, so important, a responsible closure makes sure their academic records are safe, while a bad one can mean those records are just lost forever.
So, how do you keep those records from vanishing? That's where something called a student record repository comes into play. You can think of it like a permanent, secure vault for your academic history. It's an official third party that holds on to transcripts and degrees so that years later you can still prove you earned that credit or that diploma.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, especially from the school's point of view. If a school is already failing financially, how in the world can it afford to do all of this the right way?
It's a totally fair question. I mean, hiring experts, making plans, executing them, that all costs money. And money is the one thing a struggling school doesn't have. It really feels like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. But the source material flips this question on its head with a really powerful idea. It suggests that maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question we should be asking is, how can you possibly afford not to? And that really is the key takeaway here. Planning ahead isn't just another expense, it's insurance. It's an investment to prevent a much, much bigger disaster. The cost of a well-managed shutdown is a drop in the bucket compared to the mountain of fines, refunds, and lawsuits you'll face from getting it wrong. It protects everyone involved.
So we'll leave you with this to chew on. When a school finally closes its doors, who is truly on the hook for that student's future? Is it the school? The government regulators? The accreditors? It's a question that gets right to the heart of accountability in education, and it's why having these rules in place is so incredibly important.